My name is Lena Avery, I'm 30 years old. And if you think you know how this ends, stay tuned. Your brother's twins will take your space, they need more room to grow. Mom said it casually over breakfast, like she was rearranging chairs, not my life. The smell of burnt toast filled the silence before I could even react. I blinked once, trying to swallow the ache building in my chest. Then Dad slammed his glass down so hard that juice splashed across the table. Agree, he barked, or get out of this house. That sentence didn't just hit, it cracked something quiet inside me. The twins squealed in their high chairs, my brother smirked, and Mom whispered, "She's always been too sensitive." Sensitive. That's what they called it, when I cared. When I cleaned their messes, paid the bills they forgot, stayed home during emergencies. Now I was an inconvenience. I looked around the table, the same one where we'd celebrated birthdays, graduations, even my mother's promotion. It suddenly felt foreign, like I was dining in someone else's story. I didn't fight. I didn't cry. I just nodded. That night, I packed slowly, folding my clothes with surgical calm. Every item carried a memory, a promise that no longer existed. When I wheeled my suitcase through the hall, my father didn't look up. My brother just said, "Don't make this a scene." But here's what they didn't know. I had already called a real estate agent. 2 days ago. Just in case. There was a small white cottage next door, freshly listed. Front porch wrapped in roses. Quiet. Peaceful. Mine. I signed the contract the next morning without a single tremor. The keys felt warm in my hand, like the start of something holy. That night, I stood by my new window, lights off, watching their kitchen glow. Their laughter echoed through the hedge. I didn't envy it, I studied it, like a scientist observing a dying star. Because I knew, when their peace shattered, I'd be right here, smiling through the silence. If this ever happened to you, say same in the comments. The next morning, the world was quiet, too quiet. I woke up to the sound of birds instead of arguments. Sunlight spilled across my new walls, soft and golden, as if the house itself was whispering, "You're safe now." I brewed coffee, barefoot, in my own kitchen, the one that smelled like pinewood and fresh beginnings. Through the lace curtains, I could still see my parents' house. Mom was outside watering her flowers. My brother stood on the porch, arguing over the phone. Same routine. Same storm. Different address. But I wasn't watching out of longing anymore. I was watching to remember. A week passed, and slowly, things shifted. Mom started leaving her blinds half closed. Maybe guilt looked ugly in daylight. Dad stopped parking his car in the driveway. He preferred the garage, away from my view. And my brother? He had started pacing outside every evening, whispering into his phone like a man hiding secrets. I didn't have to guess what was happening. I already knew their habits, their flaws, their pressure points, all the things they thought I was too quiet to notice. At night, I'd sit on my porch swing with a notebook, writing down every noise, every argument, every broken plate that echoed from across the hedge. No, I wasn't spying. I was studying. Because if you've ever been the invisible one in your own family, you learn that silence can be your loudest weapon. Then, one Friday evening, I saw something strange. Mom came home from the mall, but instead of carrying shopping bags, she was crying. Dad followed her in 10 minutes later, red-faced, clutching papers that looked like bills or notices. The twins were screaming, and my brother threw his phone into the yard. I sipped my coffee slowly, eyes fixed on the chaos next door. It was beginning, the unraveling I didn't have to cause. All I had to do was watch. 3 days later, the yelling started. Even with my windows closed, their voices sliced through the still air like sirens. "Do you have any idea how much this will cost us?" Dad shouted. Mom's reply came sharp and trembling. "Maybe if you hadn't co-signed for his loans." Then a crash. Glass. Silence. I sat on my porch steps, notebook open, pen resting against the page. The ink bled slightly from the humidity. I wrote down every word I could catch, not out of spite, but to remember how it felt to finally not be the cause. When I'd lived there, I was their favorite target. The reason for tension, the excuse for their bad moods. Now that I was gone, they had no shield left between them. The next morning, I saw my brother in the driveway. His shirt was wrinkled, eyes sunken, phone pressed to his ear. "I told you I'll get the money," he hissed. Just give me another week. Money. Of course. It always comes down to that. Later, Dad stopped me near the hedge when I was trimming the roses. You look settled, he said awkwardly, like the word tasted bitter. I am, I answered. He nodded, eyes scanning my cottage like he was seeing it for the first time, realizing maybe I'd landed on my feet faster than he thought. Then he asked it, the question he shouldn't have. Any chance you could help your brother out? Just this once. I smiled, setting down my shears. I think he has enough space now, remember? He blinked, confused, then forced a laugh. Don't be dramatic. I wasn't. That night, I added a new line to my notes. They only come to you when they need something. The rest of the time, you're invisible. And invisibility? It's the perfect disguise for revenge that doesn't look like revenge at all. By the following week, their lawn looked like no one cared for it anymore, weeds creeping through the fence, paint flaking off the porch rails. I used to mow that yard every Saturday morning while my brother rested. Now he couldn't even keep the grass alive. I'd sip coffee from my porch and pretend not to notice their whispers. But sometimes, I caught fragments, Dad's frustration, Mom's tears, my brother's guilt buried under pride. Then one afternoon, a letter came to my mailbox by mistake, their address written in smudged ink. The envelope bore a bank logo. Out of instinct, I turned it over, notice of delinquency. I froze. So that's what the shouting was about. Missed payments. Late fees. Maybe even foreclosure. For a moment, I felt pity. Then I remembered that breakfast table, Dad's voice cracking through my bones, agree or get out. That sentence had built this silence, brick by brick. Still, I couldn't ignore the ache that flickered somewhere deep. These were my parents. My family. Even if they'd treated me like a guest in my own home. That night, I left the envelope on their porch quietly, no note attached. Just a silent reminder, I knew. The next morning, Mom appeared at my door. She smiled nervously, holding a basket of muffins. Just a peace offering, she said. I invited her in. She looked around my little house, the sunlight, the lavender candles, the calm. Her eyes softened for a moment. You've made this place nice, she said quietly. You always had a knack for peace. I nodded. It's easier when no one's shouting. She laughed weakly, then her voice cracked. Things aren't easy at home. Your father's been stressed. I handed her a mug of tea. I know. She looked up sharply, realizing I did. When she left, I closed the door, heart steady, breath slow. This wasn't revenge. Not yet. This was just balance returning to where it belonged. The days stretched quieter, but the silence had weight now, like the pause before thunder. From my porch, I watched patterns shift. Dad started leaving early and returning late. Mom began pacing outside with her phone, whispering names I didn't recognize. My brother barely came home at all. Then one evening, their front porch light flickered and died. From where I sat, it looked symbolic, the first light of that house finally dimming. I went inside, lit a candle, and wrote in my notebook. Sometimes, justice isn't loud. It's just consistent. 2 days later, I heard a knock. When I opened the door, my brother stood there, unshaven, sweating, holding a manila folder. Lena, he said flatly. I need your help. I didn't invite him in. With what? He exhaled. It's just financial stuff. Temporary. I leaned on the doorframe, arms crossed. You mean the loans you shouldn't have taken? His jaw tightened. You've been listening. I've been living, I replied. He shoved the folder toward me. You're doing well now, right? Maybe you could. I cut him off. Remember what Dad said? Agree or get out. I chose the second option. You should try it. He blinked, stunned. So that's it? You're just going to watch us fall apart. I looked him dead in the eye. I'm not watching you fall. I'm watching you learn. He left, muttering something about betrayal. The irony made me smile. That night, rain poured down, drumming against the windows. I curled up with a blanket, tea in hand, and watched lightning flash across the hedge that divided our homes. In one brief burst, I saw their silhouettes arguing by the living room window, hands waving, shadows trembling. I whispered to the storm, This is what it looks like when the truth finally moves in. And in that thunder, I felt something I hadn't in years: peace. Not the quiet kind you wait for. The earned kind. A week later, a moving truck appeared outside their house. At first, I thought my brother was relocating again, chasing another fresh start. But then I saw the furniture, the dining set, the couch, the framed family portraits, all of it being loaded. Foreclosure. It wasn't a rumor anymore. It was real, visible, and loud enough for the whole street to see. Mom stood on the porch, arms crossed, trying to look dignified while her world crumbled. Dad barked orders at the movers, his voice trembling under false authority. The twins clung to her dress, crying as their toys were packed into boxes. From my window, I could see everything. Not because I wanted to, but because life had positioned me here, like a witness at the edge of justice. When their car pulled out for the last time, Mom glanced toward my house. Our eyes met for a single second. No words. Just the quiet acknowledgement of roles reversed. I walked to the fence, stood where the rose vines met the wood, and whispered, "Good morning." The same words I'd once said politely. This time, they tasted like closure. A few days later, I found their mail still being delivered to the old address. Among the envelopes, one caught my attention, from the same bank as before. I didn't open it. I just returned it marked moved. No forwarding address. That night, I sat in my living room with soft music playing and rain tapping against the glass. Every object in my home, every candle, book, and quiet breath, felt like a reward for restraint. Revenge isn't always about striking back. Sometimes, it's about outlasting them. Living well. Letting time do the heavy lifting while you stay still, unshaken. I closed my notebook that night, the final page filled with one sentence. They took my room. I took their peace. And for the first time, the silence didn't feel empty, it felt earned. The old house sat empty for weeks, its windows dark, its curtains swaying like ghosts remembering arguments. I'd see curious neighbors stop and whisper, wondering what happened to the Averys, the once perfect family. I didn't correct them. Some stories are better left to unfold in silence. Then one morning, a for sale sign went up. By evening, a young couple arrived, freshly married, bright-eyed, full of laughter. They walked through the house, marveling at its space, its potential. When the realtor waved, I smiled politely, like any normal neighbor would. They had no idea the walls they were admiring had soaked in years of unspoken cruelty. I spent the next few days watching as the house was cleaned, repainted, and revived. The laughter that drifted through my open window sounded new, light, untainted. It almost healed something in me, knowing that even ruins could bloom again under different hands. But then, out of nowhere, Mom called. "Lena." Her voice cracked, fragile. "Mom. We're staying with your aunt for now. Your father's struggling. Your brother blames himself. I don't know what to do anymore." For a long moment, I said nothing. Just listened to her breathing, shaky and real. Then I asked quietly, "Do you remember what you told me that morning at breakfast?" She hesitated. "We thought we were doing what's best." "No, Mom," I interrupted softly. "You were doing what's easiest." Silence. Then a faint sob. "I'm sorry," she whispered. I closed my eyes, tears burning but not falling. "I know. I just wish sorry didn't come after the eviction notice." When the call ended, I sat on the porch until dusk, the world dipped in gold and forgiveness. Forgiveness, not for them, but for myself. For staying quiet too long. That night, as the new couple moved in, laughter and music filled the air again. And I realized, I didn't want revenge anymore. I wanted peace. But fate wasn't done with me yet. Because the next morning, I found a letter on my doorstep, sealed with my father's handwriting. The envelope was weathered, the handwriting trembling, my father's. For a moment, I just stared at it, my pulse steady but cold. Then I opened it carefully, as if the paper could still break me. "Lena. I was wrong. We were wrong. I let pride ruin more than just a house. Your mother misses you. I do too. I wish I'd told you sooner that I was proud of you, not for what you bought, but for how you walked away with grace. If you can, forgive an old fool who built walls where love should have been. Dad." I read it twice, then folded it back neatly. My hands didn't shake. For years, I had chased that sentence, "I'm proud of you." Now that it came, I realized something strange. I didn't need it anymore. That night, I walked over to the old house next door. The new couple had left their porch light on. The roses I'd planted years ago, the ones Dad once said were too much work, were in full bloom again. I placed the letter beneath one of the rose bushes, letting the wind tug at the edges. It wasn't bitterness. It was burial, not of him, but of the ache that had lived inside me too long. As I turned to go, I whispered, "Good morning." The same words I'd once used as armor now felt like peace. When I got home, I poured tea, opened my notebook for the last time, and wrote, "Forgiveness isn't weakness. It's the final act of reclaiming your story." The candlelight flickered across the page, and the air felt lighter. Outside, the rain began again, soft, rhythmic, cleansing. I closed the book, looked around the quiet cottage I had built from nothing, and smiled to myself. They took my space, but I found my home. They silenced me, but I learned to speak without words. And this time, when silence filled the room, it was finally mine.